Hello, you guys. This is Coach Arnold. I am back with another Mesoamerica lecture. This time it is going to be over your Aztecs. You guys, in the chat box, you should be getting a copy of your Cornell Notes template. This is also available on your e-binder as well. Go ahead and make sure that you make your own copy. So making a copy, just press File, Make a Copy, and then change the name of it to Aztecs for me, because that's who we're talking about. These are going to be your Aztecs notes. After you've made your copy, you should be able to edit and add to it. Please remember that on the left side of your Cornell notes, you're writing the title of the slides, any questions that come up during the PowerPoint presentation, vocabulary terms, and then on the right side, you are writing a shorthand of the information from the slides, whatever is necessary for you to answer that essential question, any answers to the questions in the slides, and then definitions that go with those vocabulary terms, okay? Remember, this is a cultural discussion class, so there are no wrong answers unless you don't have support. So when we're taking our notes, I am not going to tell you definitely what you need to write. You are going to make the decision on what's most important for you to answer that essential question, okay? So today we are talking about the awesome Aztecs. You guys, the Aztecs have a huge impact on Mexico and Mexican culture. In fact, most of your Mexicans are that mixture of the Aztec and Spanish blood, making them mestizo. And a lot of that culture is still heavily infused into Mexican culture, and you can actually see it depicted on the Mexican flag, okay? So if you will, go ahead and title your notes, Aztecs. And then your essential question for today is going to be, what was their culture and what led to the fall of the Aztecs? So once again, that essential question, your EQ, what was the culture and what led to the fall of the Aztecs? All right, so your Aztecs lived in ancient Mexico roughly for 400 years. Before they migrated down to Mexico, they were very nomadic and they actually lived in the southwest area of the United States. So they live in the part of New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada. This is a part of the original Mexica territory. Okay, so your Aztecs were actually referred to as Mexica before the Spaniards came over and changed their names. They are eventually going to migrate into what is now modern day Mexico City and create their capital, Tenochtitlan. And there they're going to practice human sacrifices with the belief that the gods need to be fed daily, especially the sun god, so that he would bring the sun up every day. So according to the Mexica story, at one point in time on Earth, the sun did not come up every day and there would be periods of darkness. This can be traced back to the history and the idea of how your native culture actually comes from Asia, and they go across the Atlantic Bridge. Sorry, you guys. They crossed the Alaska Bridge to get over to the United States. You guys, in Alaska, in the winter, the sun does not come out. It is dark for months. So this explains that idea of them living throughout darkness. And as they start to migrate south, they start to get more sunlight. But your Mexica, the Aztec, they believed if they did not sacrifice a human life to the gods, or if they did not sacrifice enough lives to the sun god, that he would send them back into that time period of darkness. In addition to that, when they start to migrate, they migrate because there was an omen from the gods that was sent to them telling them that they needed to relocate. And when they relocated south, they would have to look out for a symbol, and that symbol would let them know where they were supposed to settle. If you know the symbol that it is that they are looking for in the chat box, please go ahead and let me know. And I will give you 2 participation points for that. I'll give you a hint. The symbol that these Aztec or the Mexica were looking for is the same symbol that is still found on the Mexican flag. All right, the Aztec Civilization was in southern Mexico from 900 AD to 1521. They settle and they create their capital of Tenochtitlan, and this is modern day Mexico City, settled in that valley of Mexico. So Tenochtitlan is actually a small island that is built on top of the lake. That lake is there to help them with their agriculture. It's also a source of water, and it also becomes a barrier to their enemies whenever they try to come and defeat the Mexica or the Aztecs. All right, so mighty Tenochtitlan, this is the area that they settle. As these Mexica or the Aztecs travel south into Mexico, they stumble across a cactus with an eagle sitting on top of it with a serpent in its mouth. And this is the sign from the gods that this is where they were supposed to settle. However, this land was very swampy and it was kind of rough, but they still found a way to create this beautiful, massive temple, these palaces, and this marketplace. And they created the island on the river. And then they also created chinampas for their vegetation and bridges so that they can get to the city of Tenochtitlan and then also be able to get to the outskirts and then on to their enemies to defeat them. You guys, the Aztec were extremely advanced, and because of how their city was built, they knew that they were going to need engineers, builders, and other people with specialized jobs to ensure that the civilization continued to grow and stayed strong. So because of that, they created schools to help ensure that their city was still beautiful and to build them up. And in these schools, they taught all the Aztec children about their history and their religion. That way, the culture continued to exist throughout the generation, ensuring that the civilization would stay on top and stay one of the most advanced civilizations in this region. They also created all-girls schools, and ladies, while this might seem sexist, the concept and the idea behind it is that women, we give birth, we raise, and we cultivate the next generation to continue the success of this civilization. So it was extremely important for the girls to learn about their religion, about the history, and how to be a good wife and mother so that those young warriors that they're raising are able to go on and continue to defend and bring honor back to the Mexica, and so that their husband are also successful on the battlefield as well. So girls, you would learn to cook, to sew, and to take care of the children. But remember, you have the most important role because you are creating, cultivating, and engineering the next generation to ensure that the Aztec civilization goes on to continue to be successful and strong. Gentlemen, if your father was upper class or wealthy, you were educated in law, you were also taught how to write in hieroglyphics, you had the opportunity to learn medicine to become a doctor, to become an engineer, or you can become a dream interpreter. And of course, like all other the kids, you were educated on the history and the religion. One important thing to note is that boys, you were humiliated or tormented so that you would be tough and so that you would also take pride in your education. They did not want their kids to be uneducated. They did not want them to be weak. They wanted them to be strong, smart, and successful warriors to continue the tradition of being on top. The Aztec were a strong people, and they were one of the strongest out there. If you were a commoner or a slave, you had access to free education as well. Um, However, you were most commonly trained to be a warrior, to go out and fight, to be a farmer. You were also trained on your history, your religion, different rituals, and giving manners, and taught singing and dancing. Your treatment was different from those who were more royal and had more education. You were treated the same, a little harsh, a little tormented to make sure that you were tough, but you also got the worn down, raggedy blankets that were really thin, that didn't keep you as warm as the fluffy ones that the noble kids got. And then you were also given the older bread that was typically hard and stale. But once again, boys, we did not want you to be soft. We wanted to make sure that you guys were tough for war and that you were smart and intelligent to be able to map out and plan for the future of the civilization. There were specialized professions, and this is important to note. Kids or children were trained at an early age on farming, how to trade, becoming engineers, builders, astronomers, and even in medicine. This is something you can still see more specifically in Central and Southern South America and those parts of the Hispanic diaspora. But this thought and this idea that at an early age they determine what you're going to do and then you become specialized in that. Cuba is a great example of that. Around the age of 7 or 8, they actually give their kids diagnostics tests to see what they're strong in. And whatever their strongest suit, that's what they push and they pursue them in. Whether it's athletics, mathematics, science, or writing, the focus goes on that so that those students or those children can become successful and bring honor back to their country. The same idea for the Aztec, you become specialized in this area so that you can continue to bring honor and keep your civilization as a higher up, more advanced, more dominant civilization. Your Aztec life, as I said earlier, you guys, they settled on swampy land, so they did have to slowly, gradually build the city. And in building this city, because of the island, they do build bridges and castways. Causeways, these are raised roads or paths that are built across a body of water, very similar to a bridge. And this allows for the people to be able to get into the capital of Tenochtitlan and then even outside those surrounding areas, especially during war. So, really quickly, with all of this information about the Aztec, it is safe to say that they are not savage, that they are not unintelligent, but that they are actually extremely advanced during this time because they do not have the same tools and equipment that we have today, and they do not have some of the tools that even Europeans have. So this just goes to show just how advanced they were, that they were able to build some of the most magnificent temples, pyramids, and palaces that bypass a lot of European engineering and architectural ability at the time. Farming. Farming was a huge part of your Aztec life. They did grow these crops using chinampas. Chinampas are floating gardens, and these were created by basically dropping the mud and dirt down, down, down until it started to stack up. And stacking up, you get this small little floating garden or this small little island. And on there, you are able to grow your different crops, such as peppers, corn, squash, tomatoes, and beans. And a lot of these crops that they grew actually go on to be extremely important in the American and the European diet. All right, so while the Aztec were extremely intelligent, they were also extremely fierce. It is important to know that war was a huge part of Aztec life and that they went on to conquer over 40 different cities or small villages in Mexico. So they did conquer and take down a lot of other native tribes that were around them. And when they did this, they captured slaves and they often used them as human sacrifices. So, as they captured these people, most of the women and children went on to be sold as slaves, and then the men were sacrificed. As the video that I showed for the Mayan, their hearts were taken out and their heads were cut off. As a way of honoring them, the heads would sometimes be put on walls or on stakes on display, saying, like, hey, they paid honor. They were part of the sacrifice to our gods that ensures that we still have prosperity and that the sun will continue to rise. So the whole reason for these wars, these wars that we'll talk about next time as well, was for the Aztecs to be able to go out and conquer people for the sacrifices they needed for their religious rituals. Unfortunately, all good things do have to come to an end, and the Aztecs are going to fall. In 1521, the Spanish conquistadors come in and they defeat the Aztec Empire. A conquistador, just in case you did not know, is a Spanish soldier, and they are led by Hernan Cortez. They eventually get into the capital of Tenochtitlan, and they have it completely destroyed or demolished during the war. If you look at modern day Mexico City, some of those older buildings are actually built out of the remains of the city of Tenochtitlan. Those bricks were repurposed and put into different churches and different official government buildings for New Spain. All right, I have a short video for you that is going to talk a little bit more about the fall of the Aztecs before we get into our reading that discusses it as well.
When Spanish ships landed in Mexico in 1519, the mighty Aztec Empire was at the height of its power. From their capital at Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs controlled much of what is now Mexico and Central America, ruling some 15 million people. Aztec palaces were as vast and sophisticated as any of those in Europe, and their temples rivaled the Egyptian pyramids. But within just 2 years, the mighty Aztec Empire crumbled, and Tenochtitlan lay in ruins after a brutal siege led by Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez. No great ancient civilization ever fell so far, so fast. What happened to the Aztecs? For one thing, they had too many enemies. For years, the Aztecs used brutal force against neighboring tribes and city-states, forcing them to pay costly tributes and hand over victims for the human sacrifices central to the Aztec religion. Cortez turned these people's hatred of the Aztecs to his advantage. Spanish invaders also had superior weapons, plus guns, trained horses and dogs, and fully loaded warships that allowed them to overcome the Aztecs' greater numbers. Ineffective leadership also played a role in the fall of the Aztecs. Their emperor, Montezuma, believed Cortez might be the bearded Aztec god who was prophesied to conquer his people and bring universal peace. Unsure how to confront the Spanish leader, he was captured in 1520 and was later killed, possibly by his own people. His brother Cuitlahuac took over, leading an army that drove the Spaniards from Tenochtitlan. But the Aztecs then confronted another powerful enemy, smallpox. Brought aboard Spanish ships, the disease decimated the Aztec population, killing the new emperor and thousands of others. With the help of several thousand Indians, including Texcocans, Chalca, and Tepanec, Cortez and his Spanish force besieged Tenochtitlan, cutting off the city's water and food supplies. Despite a fierce resistance, the Aztec city fell on August 13, 1521. More than 200,000 people died in the struggle. With the Aztec Empire effectively destroyed, Cortez became governor and captain general of New Spain in 1522. Under Spanish rule, Mexico City rose from the ruins of Tenochtitlan, and Christianity spread throughout the region, replacing the temples and traditions of a once great ancient civilization.
All right, you guys, so we are going to go into our reading. Inside of our e-binders. But first, we are going to upload our notes, okay? So if you will, open your e-binder. In your e-binder, go ahead and click on your pages and make sure that you're on Unit 1. At the top where it says Notes, you're going to add those notes by clicking the plus sign. And this should be on the Aztec. I'm just showing you on the Mayan, okay? So click the plus sign, and this should take you to your drive. You should be able to easily scroll down to find those notes. And then once you've got them, you're just going to double click and they will be added in. If you go back and make any changes in your drive on these notes, they will update in your e-binder. Okay? Next thing we'll need to do after you've added your notes is for you to scroll down to your resources so we can get into conquistadors or guides. And that's all I have for you guys today. Until next time.